On this episode of Popscast, a celebration of the unsung hero of the orchestra, the viola. Also a chat with C4A co-founder and Urbana Pops Orchestra Principal Viola Robin Kearton, who will be giving a free recital on April 9th, and today will be giving me a viola lesson. Popscast is made possible by the Urbana Pops Orchestra and the Community Center for the Arts in Urbana, Illinois. Engaging in community arts discussions and issues in Illinois and around the world, this is Popscast. Hello, I'm Daniel Sutherland, Principal Conductor of the Urbana Pops Orchestra, and welcome to another episode of Popscast. Today we're talking to Robin Kearton, the co-founder of the Community Center for the Arts here in Urbana, Illinois, who will be giving her free viola recital at the Urbana Free Library on April 9th at 2 p.m. She'll be joined by accompanist Matthew Gladden, Tom Foe, and students from the Community Center for the Arts. Robin, you're an incredibly distinguished member of the musical community, and C4A also supports that community in so many ways. Thank you so much for being here.
It's absolutely my pleasure, Daniel. Thanks.
It's mine too, and I want to know, when did your musical story start?
Oh, well, I think that I was in the 5th grade, so I was about 11 or 12, and
So like everybody else?
like everyone else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't come from one of those musical prodigy families or anything like that. No, nobody else except one of my cousins plays music. I think that my parents are both truly music appreciators in their various, in their own individual ways. But they had a string quartet do a concert in our school one day, and I was in it enraptured. And I went home and told my mother that I wanted to play the violin, and she took my temperature, and it was like, no, but my parents, they let me try it, and I liked it, but I didn't really understand what it was to be a musician. It was just kind of this cool way to go, and it was sort of fun to make these sounds, and I didn't feel any affinity for it other than, well, this is kind of fun, until I got to middle school, and that was the first time that I beheld the viola.
So you started as a violin player?
I started as, everybody started as a violin player, and actually the guy who taught our class, it was the very, very beginning of strings in the public schools in Lakeland, Florida, where I grew up. And they still have a thriving program, I'm happy to announce. So the guy who started this program was this kind of old cool bass player, which I didn't realize he was cool until years later when I was looking back at him. But he was this jazzer guy who played. And to me, he was just like this kind of old guy who taught the bass, but I was fond of him anyway. And
jazz isn't really a violin kind of thing.
No,
either.
And he didn't even play violin, but it was, he just wanted to do it. He wanted kids to play, and he went and did it, and I'm grateful to him. When I got to middle school, I heard the viola, and I just instantly wanted to switch. And I had to lobby hard to do it, amazingly, because...
Really?
Yeah.
So your teacher didn't say you're going to make more money as a violist if you're good than you will as
No.
Or you'll get better gigs or more gigs?
No, I think he saw that I was getting more and more interested in it, and I think he was looking down the road and I was going to be a violin section leader, and I was like, no, I really want to do the viola. And everybody tried to talk me out of it, but which of course made me more obstinate that I needed to do that. Anyway, that was it. Once I picked the viola, there was no looking back until I went to Florida State, where I did most of my viola performance degree. Then I moved to South Florida, and I was a freelancer, and they had like 20 little orchestras down there that everybody played in.
Sure.
And
just like here in Illinois.
Yeah. When I moved here to Champaign-Urbana in 1992, I had already been playing with the Illinois Symphony for a number of years because I lived in Indiana and I just commuted like everyone else does.
Sure, yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll just, play in the CU Symphony. I know they need some string players. And I looked, and their viola section was full. I know, you're making that face like that's like I'm telling you a story.
Yeah, I struggle to find.
True.
I mean, you play in the viola section anyway, and I'm always stressed out about getting viola players.
Yeah. So, but I really wanted the gig, so I just, I'd been teaching violin for years, and I just said, well, can I just sit in the back of the seconds? Don't make me play too high, And so I did that for a number of years, and eventually got to be much more comfortable as a violinist as well, which was good. Expanded my horizons. And for those of you out there who think that playing viola is bad for your violin chops or vice versa, you're not right. I think it's everything that you play feeds the other things that you play.
And I've heard that. I've heard that before too, probably both ways.
Yeah, it really does. Because when I first started playing the violin, it was such a little toy that I took that ease into the viola. And but the thing about the viola, I love the violin, by the way.
Sure.
But the thing about the viola is the tone.
Sure. Is that what made you want to switch back in your early days?
That and the girl who played viola was really cool.
Oh, so it was a social thing.
It was a social thing.
Gotcha.
Music's always a social thing.
Oh no, that's true.
She was so cool. I was never that cool, but it got me playing viola.
I'm sure you were cool.
And maybe in my own nerdy little way. But the thing about the viola, though, and what I stress when people want to study viola with me is the tone. And otherwise, it's a hard instrument to play. It's big. It's cumbersome. The parts aren't always gratifying. And
mostly never gratifying.
Yeah. Why would you want to do it? Well, because it sounds really great. And I have my sort of tone meter that I teach to my students is chocolate. It's like you could play with a Nestle's Crunch kind of tone, or you could dig in and really listen and find what the viola can do and play with a really fine dark chocolate tone.
That, first of all, is a great depiction of that, but also makes me very, very hungry for chocolate.
Yeah, well.
That's a great way to describe the sound of the viola as well, because it's not. I mean, it's not a, I suppose, as an obtrusive sound, or as a. I'm trying not to be insulting, as an attention-seeking sound as the violin. It's not as high, and the parts are never as I suppose as
they're always
as featured.
Buried in the texture.
Yeah, right. But it's a sound that is required, though.
It is,
because without it, it's actually the viola is kind of this perfect. At least to me, I could be totally wrong. You would know too. It's kind of a perfect balancing voice between a very bright, high-pitched sound and a lower, kind of, I guess, scratchy sound.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about violas, and its tonal, one of the tonal aspects about violas is, I read once that the violin is acoustically perfect, and the viola most certainly is not. Every viola I've ever played has a very different personality, and you try hard to find one or to tweak yours so that it sounds even, but you have to really, really try hard to find out how to play each individual viola.
And violins aren't?
Well, they are too, but I think it just less so.
Yeah.
They're just more even-tempered. Anyway, as far as that sonic texture, yeah, I think the viola sound is generally suited to its function, which is probably why it gets put there in the texture.
Sure. So who are you listening to that guided your sound? Who did you listen to that you really wanted to sound like?
As a violist?
Sure. Or as a violinist?
I suppose that my teacher in college was the first one that I really wanted to sound like. And his name is Daryl Barnes. And he is this really sweet guy. He studied with the great pedagogue Ivan Galamian. And I was really impressed that he played in the Philadelphia Orchestra under Ormandy. And he was just, well, he probably is. I haven't seen him for a number of years, but he was a pretty cool guy. And when he played the viola, it just sounded wonderful.
Sure.
I actually I had a friend in high school who was a year ahead of me who went to Florida State. He was a violinist, and he was the driving force behind me becoming interested in the violin. He was kind of my best friend all the way through high school. And when he went to Florida State and met this viola teacher who was new there, he said, "Oh, by the way, you're coming up in October because he's giving a recital." Yeah. And well, sure, I'll do that. And I went to hear it, and I was instantly enamored of that sound. And because up until that point, I was pretty much deciding, I was looking around for which school I wanted to go to be a biology major.
Oh, no kidding.
And when I went to hear that, I was like, no,
Yeah.
I need to play the viola.
Yeah. Now you're not just you're not just a classical player. I know a few weeks ago we did an episode together with your husband Tom Foe about Clifftop, the festival, and about a completely different style of playing from classical playing. And we talked a little bit about how you discovered that. So, and I assume that you started off as a classically trained string player,
Yes.
and then discovered more Appalachian.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, when I was an undergrad in college, you hang out on the practice room floor, and there's all sorts of unsavory characters up there, and including jazz players.
Oh, sure, saxophone players.
Yeah, some of them were saxophone players, yeah, and bass players. And there was this one guy, and when I was somebody who wasn't completely turned off to the idea, he glommed onto the idea that I needed to learn to be a jazz or a gypsy jazz player. And I thought that sounded pretty intriguing, but I was awful at it. And I didn't know that, but that's when I discovered about Stefan Grappelli. But it was an insurmountable obstacle for me at that point, and I just kind of let it go. But when I lived in South Florida, I was fortunate to get into the circuit that got to play lots of different shows. I played with a number of really
like theater.
No, like what they have at the Assembly Hall. Like I got to play backup orchestras with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay,
so
sure.
I got to play with really amazing people like George Benson and Tony Bennett, and my favorite all-time one was playing with Sammy Davis Jr. And here, just seeing the passion and having to play still written out music, but
in a different style.
In a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that kind of? Did you have a strong interest in improvisation at that point, or did it kind of evolve into something where you became a little bit more interested in improvising?
Well, I thought it would be really cool to be able to do it, but I didn't put in any work on it at all, and so I wasn't very good. And I put that away for a number of years.
Well, that's a nerve-wracking thing to do,
Yeah.
and I mean, even as a saxophone player, I enjoy playing classical saxophone, but improvisation is even still today is hard for me, and it always makes me feel kind of like I'm not doing it
Intimidated.
right. Yeah. So I totally understand.
I got into improvising from an unlikely place, actually.
Oh.
When I first moved to town here, I fell in with Barbara Headland and Dorothy Martirano had a booking agency, and they would hire me frequently to play gigs with them. And Dorothy's notorious for just flying off the page, and she inspired me, and we got to a point where we would sort of egg each other on to add ornaments in this Mozart trio that we'd played 5 million times. And so we, and once I did a little learning and found out that this is legitimate, we can do this, because they kind of expected it at the time, then we would just get doing it more and more. Some pieces lend themselves to it quite readily.
Sure.
And also Dorothy did a lot of the arrangements, which she would just kind of sketch out and expect to be filled in. And that was kind of how I got started improvising. It wasn't like studying bebop theory or anything like that.
Yeah, it's not even completely out of the out of the realm of possibilities in classical music for improvisation. And Baroque players improvise all the time. And
yeah, you're supposed to.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's actually it's a neat parallel between the improvisational chops that you would expect to have to improvise compared to exactly what you just said about like learning like bebop theory or the thing that like modern jazz.
Yeah. My next step there was playing in a tango band called the Guerrilla Parlor Ensemble. And the leader of that band was the bandoneon player. That was a really fun band, and that was my first band, And he would kind of write out charts and was kind enough to put the chord structure in on a lot of them, and that got to me to thinking and more along the lines of voice leading and what notes could I put in here. And so I started thinking more harmonically that way.
Sure.
But I started it out with any kind of improvisation thinking linearly instead of vertically.
Like, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I think that's what most people think when you have to improvise. It's like you have to know all the chords.
Sure,
And you have
yeah.
to,
That's how I was taught in improvisation.
Yeah. But I like to think of it as listening, and then finding what fits my fingers and what sounds good on the instrument, and hoping that it sounds right.
Sure.
And so that's one approach to it.
Now, being a working musician and even a teacher is one thing, but being an arts administrator is something completely different, which is a role that you came into in 2006 with the Community Center for the Arts. What made you want to form a nonprofit?
Insanity?
People ask me about the Urbana Pops, and I say the same thing. And people have asked me if I could go back and do something differently. I jokingly say that I wouldn't do it because it's very stressful, and it's
But
probably
that's
the reason
not true, is it?
Well, not at all. Me not wanting to do it, not at all. I mean, I think that despite how many gray hairs it's given me, I think I've loved every second of it, and I wouldn't believe you if you told me you didn't love every second of it either.
Yeah, there were seconds where I grouse, but in 2003, I had about 50 violin students in my home studio, and well, no, that was before I went to grad school. I was finishing up I didn't realize that I was finishing up my graduate program, which didn't actually ever finish, but I was coming to the close of my graduate school program. And when I went back to grad school, it was to study Baroque performance practice, which is, guess what, lots of improvising.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But I was lucky enough to wind up being a teaching assistant in the World Music Survey a lot of times. And it was great for me because I had always been interested in different music styles. And it was a fun class for me to just have to go to. And one of the things that I liked was I started to think that, well, everywhere that the violin went, people embraced it and incorporated it into their own music. And that sort of made me fall in love with the violin again. And I was also sort of starting the old-time fiddling stuff. And that's when I got this idea to do a summer program for my students. And that's how the Bodacious String Band was born. And it was just this 1 week thing. I don't remember if I told you this part of the story or not, but
I'm happy to hear it again.
Yeah, the kids in the camp they liked it, and they insisted that we keep going, and it developed, and that's really how the school was born, because every time we would play out anywhere, people would call me asking for teachers, and as it turned out, just a whole series of events coalesced into, well, it's time to start this school. And so we just went for it.
Was there any one particular driving force that made you decide ultimately yes or no? Was there anyone there maybe at your shoulder saying like you need to do this, you finally need to do this?
Well, I had all these conditions that I had set. Well, I can't do it unless this or this or this or this. And the last condition was, well, if I'm going to start a school, I have to have other teachers. And I don't have any other teachers. Oh, well, I can't do it. And then sort of out of the blue, a former student called me up and said, well, I'm finished with my degree and I'm back in town. I think I'd like to start teaching violin. Can you help me get started? I was like, but that wasn't enough. Then I was talking.
Someone called that a sign, perhaps.
Well, the next sign was that I was talking to, who is currently my husband, Tom, who was at that point a bandmate with whom I was becoming friends. Sure. And
that's romantic.
Yeah, we weren't even romantic yet. But I was telling him about this idea. It's like, oh, it'd be, I'm kind of thinking about this. And without missing a beat, he said, well, if you do that, you're going to get tied up with administration and this and this and this. And I just said, how is it possible that you just know all this stuff off the top of your head? He said, oh, well, I worked with a community music school in Portland, Maine for years. And he goes, but I'll help you if you want.
Well, that's as a second sign. I suppose you probably ran out of reasons not to do it.
That was,
if you have a good support and you have,
that was the
teachers.
last straw.
Sure, yeah. And you, I was reading a little bit about the C4A and how amazing it is, and how you started off with small number of teachers. Were they all violin teachers, or?
Well, the first crew was the two of us, myself and my former student Kelly McQueen, and Tom.
Oh, I got you. So they were the
So
they were the
we
ones.
were the three.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, and then Kelly went, her doing her own thing after a while. But there were more signs. Like every time we needed somebody, they would just appear. Rob Crum came up on the horizon pretty early. Actually, there was another pretty funny sign where this. I don't think I'll name him because I think he wants to be anonymous, but it's a guy who goes to all kinds of music things. And I didn't really know him very well at the time. And he just, I saw him, he said, "What's new?" I said, "Well, I'm thinking about doing the school," but I don't know why I was telling him this. And I saw him a few days later and he handed me a business card and said, "Here, I've given this lawyer a retainer to give you a consultation about what you should do about incorporating."
No kidding.
And it's like, that was another sign.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. I'm sure that that made it quite easy.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
He's still an avid supporter of our school.
Did you attract teachers quickly, or was it just the three of you for a while?
It was the three of us for a little while, and then, like I said, Rob Crum came on to teach guitar and bass, and he's sort of a more gregarious fellow than I tend to be.
Okay.
And so he was a really good spokesperson. And then we got to be sort of full, and I'm very comfortable teaching violin up to a degree, but then we started to get some students who I felt, I could teach them, but it would be better if there was a real violin teacher. And then this really fabulous player named Jan Matthews came back to town and just called me and said, "Oh, I'm back in town. Do you have any students?" And it's like, actually, we do.
Right.
And every time, we were thinking, well, should we start a piano program? And then somehow Chris Raymond, the jazz pianist, came into our...
Yeah, he coached a jazz ensemble. I was in Milliken. A teacher went on hiatus for a while, and that's when he's a really neat guy too.
Oh, he's fabulous. Yeah. And every time it was sort of like, should we add this? That person would show up. And it was really great.
It sounds a bit divine.
Yeah,
in,
it was.
In some ways, it sounds like it was a pretty informal addition every time too.
A lot of synchronicity was in. I think that kind of thing is, we just happened to be paying attention and saw there's this person.
Sure.
They can come in, and they saw that we were doing something cool and wanted to join. And
sure. It couldn't have been all fun, though, especially at the beginning, I bet. And there had to have been things that made it very hard for you to do it.
Well, not being trained in business was one. I mean, I was, in a way, we started in 2006 and we incorporated early in 2007. And then we thought, well, we're going to become a nonprofit so we can apply for all these grants, right? So we did that, and it took us until 2009 to get all the paperwork and everything done. Right when the economy sort of started drying up, and all these grants was just this fantasy. And I think that was hard, but it also taught us how to live within our means. We've never been dependent on outside funding. We've always just been self-sufficient, and I think that's probably a gift of having been a freelance musician for all those years.
Yeah. Talking about grants, well, actually, you said that you don't really rely on outside funding.
We get it sometimes, but we don't depend on it.
Sure. So does that does it come from tuition then? Most
of our is tuition and gift. Well, by outside funding, I mean grants and foundations, and we do have a members program that's sort of modeled after the public radio supporter members. You get a T-shirt.
So that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and when we started, I thought and said a number of times that I'd rather have 100 people give us $20 than have one big donor. And and we have people who are generous as they're able to be, but we have some $20 members. And we have some $1,000 members, and they're all very appreciated.
That reminds me a little bit of the Bernie Sanders campaign from this last year. There was $28, I think, was $27. $27. Yeah, that's the amount I give a couple of times. I think I was reading a little bit about your group, and you have your mission is so concise, and I was reading about removing barriers that keep people away from the arts, and I was wondering, first of all, what exact barriers do you mean? Like,
That's a good question. I mean, an obvious one is financial, and as much as we're able to, if somebody needs financial assistance, we provide it.
Sure.
And our ability to do that is dependent on a lot of things, but one of the easiest ways for us to do it is if somebody wants to participate in one of our ensembles and can't afford it, as long as the ensemble's paying for itself anyway, then we can help somebody do that way. The other, what I think is a bigger obstacle, which I think is especially critical with the classical music world now, is just people not understanding the music or thinking that it's a certain way. And part of that, I think, is the way it's presented to them.
Sure.
Part of it, is just not knowing how to listen to it. And so part of our mission is educating people and making it accessible. I spend so much time, I've visited the Krannert Center so many times that I don't even think about it, but I know people who are kind of nervous about going in there. Like,
oh, sure, yeah, I know, and I know exactly what you mean, because we've had discussions with our board with Urbana Pops about where to perform in the earlier days, and about how there's a bit of a stigma about like going to a legit concert hall. Yeah,
and because you don't know, you might not do it right.
Right, or you might cough at the wrong time, or your phone might go off, and that's actually a really great point. I think it's one of the reasons that we've kind of stuck to where we are, and I mean we have a really great relationship with the school district as well. And
sure,
they've got a great space over there that we play in.
Well, we've had we do our faculty concerts in public places, and the last couple of years we've done it at the Iron Post. And we fill that place with people who come to hear chamber music, and other things that we play. But, they like it. It's not so formal, and they're not so worried about if they're going to do it wrong.
Right, yeah. That's a really great point. You're also very culturally diverse and accepting as well. And I assume in your membership, but also in the repertoire that you play. What would one expect to hear
at one of our concerts?
Sure. Well, for example, your viola recital that we're going to talk about here in a second.
Recital. Okay.
Or just like basically, when one of your groups plays who does a gig.
Yeah.
But just as an example, your viola recital is actually very culturally diverse, and I would assume that your choice in music like that is probably very similar to how your group, or how C4A as an organization picks performing art, like performing groups and the music that they play.
Sort of. I guess you could say there's an analogy there, because we do have on our faculty people who are just amazing classical players. And we also have people who specialize in jazz, and people who specialize in folk music styles, and more. I could just keep rattling off the different genres. Our most recent hire is a guitarist who specializes in Congolese rumba. It's beautiful stuff. You're going to be hearing more from him, I think.
Oh, nice.
But the viola recital, I thought, well, Urbana Pops is hosting this. I think there's probably going to be some expectation that the principal violist might play something classically violist.
Sure,
and so I started there, and I thought, well, what would be fun to play, and what would I enjoy playing, and what do I think people would like hearing? And I think you can't go wrong with Bach.
Sure.
Except that you can go wrong with Bach, because when everybody knows it, and so, whatever people do is like, somebody's going to be going, oh, that's not how I would do it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. The Bach interpretation.
Yeah. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that later.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. One of the things that I got from my primary teacher when I was an undergrad is he always wanted me to have a story in my mind that would help me create the musical atmosphere that I was looking for. And that, I love that. But the thing with whenever I play this Bach prelude, the story shifts according to the day.
Yeah,
I don't.
sure.
When I first was.
How many notes you miss, for example?
Well, I don't do that.
Oh, well, of course not.
No. If I play a different note, I meant to, because it's improv.
It was improvisation.
Yeah,
sure.
right.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, and so there's that, and I can sort of tell you a little bit about that. When I first was an undergrad playing this one, I just tried to have every note perfect, and I was really worried about what the bowing's going to be, and I still really want it to sound good. I still want it to flow. I'm really concerned that it be in tune, and that kind of thing. But the story that I'm telling is a lot more spontaneous. There are many versions of it, and I don't actually know which one's going to come out until it does.
Sure.
Which is pretty fun because it keeps me entertained. Yeah.
I see in fall 2015 you added flow arts performance. Tell me a little bit about that, because I'm just genuinely curious.
Yeah, I know. Nobody knows what that means. And even if I describe it to you, it gets to be like, what does that mean? The teachers we have, they specialize in juggling and hooping, and one of them eats fire. And but what it is like this kind of, they say prop manipulation, which is such this dry sounding term, but they combine all this stuff. It's a couple that teaches it, Michael and Satina Braswell. He has a martial arts background. She has a dance background. And the flow arts is named after the state of flow that was made popular by a book by Csikszentmihalyi, which is where you just become so engrossed and absorbed in something that sort of time ceases, and you're just totally,
like a hypnotic state.
Yeah,
maybe, yeah.
And that is really analogous to the way you can get with your music.
Oh, sure.
Too.
Oh,
and,
I'm sure it's identical.
Yeah, and so I think that's why they fit in our program, because it's not music performance, but
it's movement.
It sounds like movement. It's rhythmic. It's visual. It's artistic. It's it's stuff you practice and then combine to make a presentation.
Sure. No, it's also absolutely relevant.
Yeah, and it looks really cool.
Yeah.
when you perform it. So.
That sounds actually really, really neat.
Yeah, it is.
Now, we were talking a little bit about your viola recital, which is, at least in some point, a solo recital for viola. And people might be a little surprised to hear that viola can be a solo instrument. So tell us a little bit about how a professional violist approaches the solo scene for viola. I mean, what repertoire is available? Is it extremely common that the solos are played?
Well, more recently, I think 20th century composers discovered that the viola was kind of a cool voice that they could use. And so there's a lot of things written more recently. And if you're looking back in classical period, it's kind of slim pickings.
Sure.
The best thing that I know of is the Mozart Sinfonia Concertante, but you have to share it with the violin.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I think a bulk of it is 19th century pieces. Like I'm playing this piece by Schumann. The violists argue perennially with the clarinet players about whether Brahms wrote those sonatas for viola or clarinet, but he actually endorsed both of them being able to
Also,
play
clarinets have enough to play, I feel. So
yeah.
I think you deserve to say it's yours.
Thanks. Carl Maria von Weber wrote some pieces, but it's still not nearly as much repertoire as violin stuff. So, and we steal the cello suites from the cellos.
Everybody steals the cello suites, I think.
Yeah, well, that's because they're such good pieces.
Yeah. And that's you're playing one. You're playing the first
the prelude
Bach's first
from
cello suite. Sure. Oh yeah, the prelude.
Yeah.
Which I've played on saxophone before.
Yeah,
It's
everybody
an
plays
F.
that one.
It's an F major because that's the highest note.
No, it's in G.
Oh, for us it's F.
No.
Are you?
I'm just giving you
trouble.
trouble.
I gotcha. Okay. You're. I see what you're doing there.
I'm conductor baiting.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. We're gonna trademark that. It is a really beautiful piece, though, and it's very hard for a wind player to play because because
there's no place to breathe.
Right. Bach wasn't thinking about breathing at all, but it also kind of translates directly to how you guys bow as well, because that gives us information about how to breathe as well. You're not just playing classical works, though. You've got Roger Hammerstein, some more ethnic culturally diverse things. And I see also on here that you've arranged even a pop tune.
Mm-hmm.
And they're your custom arrangements.
Yeah.
Is that something you do often, or?
I wish I had time to do it more, but I like doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually do them for my students.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good reason to do them.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And you've got, actually, speaking of students, you've got several appearing with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this pairs beautifully with the education mission, I think, of both of our organizations.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about some of the students that will be with you and what they're playing.
Yeah, well, the youngest is a violin student of mine who plays in the Bodacious String Band also. She's 9.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Cecilia.
And an intrepid fiddle player.
She's an intrepid fiddle player.
Yeah. You wrote that to me in an email. I kind of did laugh at that.
She's bold.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at the band and say who will take a solo, she always steps up.
Wow.
And she performed at the Old Time Fiddlers Association competition in October,
mm-hmm.
twice, I think. And she placed last time she was there. And she has written 2 compositions, and we'll be playing one of her compositions on
mm-hmm.
the recital too.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And then this one is, it's the PTA at her schools has some kind of networking where they get kids to do creative works,
mm-hmm.
and she decided that she was going to write these songs. And her song has passed out of regional and state and into a national level of consideration, which
kidding.
I think is just great.
That would be really neat.
It's an adorable song.
Yeah.
And she composed the words and the music, and we kind of worked out harmony parts and stuff like that. So.
I'm really excited.
Mm-hmm.
You've also got Sam Atkinson, a
mm-hmm.
cello player, also with the Bodacious String Band. How long has he been with you guys? Have you had him since he was a little kid, or?
Oh.
How many? Well, I guess how many? You have a lot of string players
in the band,
right?
Yeah. I don't remember how long Sam's been in there. At least several years.
Mm-hmm.
He studies with Chris Peterson, who's one of our teachers, and
our sound
also
engineer.
play.
Sure.
Also, yeah.
Yeah. And then we at least UPO and C4A shares at least one head on the recital here. Elizabeth Atkinson,
mm-hmm.
who is a violin and viola player.
Mm-hmm.
Also the Bodacious alum.
Yeah, she's an alum. She gained entrance into the youth orchestra, and for a while she did both, but it made for a very, very long Sunday.
Oh, sure. I bet.
Because both of them practiced then.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she's still on call.
Oh, great. All right, so we've got some works here, and you mentioned before kind of how you tell a story with the music that you play, and how it could differ from day to day. And I was wondering perhaps if you could walk me through that a little bit on one of your pieces.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Great. Okay, so we were talking earlier about the seemingly infinite ways you could interpret Johann Sebastian Bach and his music. And I was really excited to see also that on your program you have the prelude from his first cello suite, which is probably easily the most famous out of all the music from his cello suites. And you were also talking about how telling a story guides the decisions that you make in the playing. So I was hoping we could play through this, and you could kind of talk me through it a little bit and kind of tell me what you're thinking.
Okay. So what I think is fun about this piece is that almost the whole thing has the same rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
It's just yaga daga 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 daga, and you have to take this long string of notes and turn it into something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I could play the very famous opening.
Okay.
Just trying to make everything sound perfect. That sounds like that's the etude approach.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah. And you can do it perfectly with a metronome, but the thing is that Bach was thinking about the key of G when he wrote this.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people in their recording engineer department might think it's better on the cello, but it's still good on the viola. And what I like to do, what I like for people to know is that Bach was these guys were super aware of the instruments that they were writing for. And so he's got this G ground bass over his opening standard 1-4-5. In non-musician terms, it's a chord progression where you start in one place and you go away from that place and then you come back and it feels really good when you get there.
Sure.
Okay, so
That's the best explanation, I think, of a chord progression I've ever heard.
I got it from a friend.
Yeah.
But so here is he uses the open G string, which if you're not familiar with the instrument, the open string will ring for a long time. It'll just keep ringing. If I finger a note, it's still resonant, but it doesn't ring as long. And so if I hit that string just right with my bow, it'll keep ringing the whole time I'm playing the other notes. And I like to take advantage of that. So. We just got back home. Didn't that sound right?
Well, and it sits underneath the whole thing the entire time,
and so the
too.
G, it's sort of like if I were playing a duet with, maybe we can do this when you have your lesson. Yeah. Maybe you can just play the G the whole time.
I could probably handle that.
Yeah, it would be fun. Let's do that.
Okay.
But so that's the theoretical thing where, well, this G is important. And there's this chord progression that it encapsulates what happens during the whole piece. And then he goes back and says, okay, well, all right, I could stop here, or I could go back and elaborate on this a little bit. Sure. Yeah. And the thing I like about this prelude is realizing that Bach was a champion improviser, and he would improvise things like this. And this prelude is supposed to sound sort of like somebody's improvising. And that's one of the reasons that I think I have license to not play it absolutely metronomically. Sure. And there are places along here where I think, well, let me see if I can sound like this just occurred to me. Okay, so here's one of those places. This one. There I like to think about the beautiful low register, chocolate viola tone. That, I wouldn't mind doing that one again just so you can hear how good that note is. Somehow you have to recover. You've just totally spent.
You've taken in a lot of information.
Yeah, and now you have to kind of ponder it over and build back up that head of steam. Out how you're going to get out of it. Okay? Here's the sensitive part. And that part I love because it's fun to pull out the bass line. In his music, you can have this long string of notes, but he has different voicings going on
Sure.
at the same time. So I'll try to make it really obvious here. Okay, and here's the home stretch. And it's actually, there's this A drone, the open A string goes back and forth, but there's still like a moving line that's the most important part. And he ended up the same way he started, but just...
So it was also approached from a moment of anxiety that you know must lead somewhere good.
Yeah.
Or you'll never have satisfaction from it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's a really gorgeous work in itself. And I also can help notice that even though you're playing 16th notes the entire time, that you still choose the special ones.
Yeah.
And they get vibrato, which is easy to see when you watch a string player play. It's always very easy to see, and that you still pick these special notes to color just a little bit with a different technique. It's really, really great.
Yeah, one of the best explanations of that idea that I've ever heard came from the jazz violinist from Chicago named Johnny Frigo. I went and interviewed him, and he talked about improvising a lot because I was really into it at that point, and he called them the juicy notes.
Oh, sure.
I love that expression.
Yeah. All right, so you've also got, you're going to be appearing with a bunch of different students, and we were talking a little bit about kind of the ethnic diversity of your program as well. Some South American tunes here, and there's something from there you could play for me?
Sure. For that one, I think I'm going to get the little brother out.
Okay. You were telling us a little bit during the break that the same guy built both of these instruments.
Oh yeah.
And we'll have a picture of them too.
Okay, great.
When we release the podcast.
Yeah, his name is Paul Schuback. He's in Portland, Oregon, and he's actually primarily a cello builder. But he made both of my instruments.
Oh, I gotcha.
So let's see. I could give you just like a little sample of some of them.
Yeah.
My favorite tune right this minute.
Okay.
Is called Palomita.
Okay.
And it's the little dove.
Okay.
So the main part goes. It's just a really perky song.
Sure.
And then
Lots of syncopation.
Yeah. And the reason I had to switch to this one on the violin instead of the viola is because if I wanted to play it on viola, I would have to kind of reinterpret it. But that's a close interpretation to the way it was conceived. And that Andean, it's strongly influenced by Andean folk music. But what I thought it would fit on this concert nicely is because it's not exactly folk music. It's just really deeply rooted in that tradition, but it's composed. And but the Andean folk music, they really like the really high up flutes, and even their guitars are really little and high pitched, and so it wouldn't have the right sound on the viola.
I got you. Yeah, no, that makes a whole bunch of sense. Speaking of viola, I really would like to learn how to play a little bit of it.
You would?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. I can't. I mean, I'm not a string player. I'm awful at pretty much every string instrument. But
Oh,
I
no,
think,
no, no.
I think,
You just haven't had the proper experience
all right. Well,
offered to you.
I count on you to guide me through that then.
Okay. You're about to have one of life's greatest pleasures.
Okay. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah. So the thing to realize about the viola, as we talked about earlier, the tone is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're going to start with your bow.
Okay.
All right. And here's how I show people how to hold a bow. First of all, can you just make your hand be like a dog paw? Yeah, perfect. Okay. And then when I'm going to hold you here, and you just let your hand drop like that, and I'm going to bend your thumb and stick it right there like that. And that looks really great. The more relaxed you can have, the deeper the chocolate of your tone will be.
Okay.
Okay. And what he has here that you guys can't see on the podcast is that he has his middle two fingers wrapped around the side of the bow to the little black part that we call the frog. And he has his thumb on the underside of the bow, and it's bent so that he can get a lot of action out of that big muscle in his thumb. Okay? And we're going to just slide the viola up here. You don't even need your fingers yet. Okay? So there's only 3 things you can do to change the tone on your viola. Okay? So we'll put the bow right here on the string. One of the things you can change is where you touch the string with your bow. Okay? So if we touch it over here, over the black part, that's the fingerboard, it'll sound fluffy like this. If we put it too close to the bridge, it'll sound kind of grindy. Okay, I like to put it right in the middle. Okay, so where you put the bow is one of the things. The other thing is how fast you move the bow. Not how fast the notes go, but how fast the bow goes.
From start to finish.
Yeah, so if you're moving it quickly, it'll sound like this. Okay, if you move it slowly, it sounds like that. Okay, so you have to strike the balance.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, I know, but don't worry, because the third variable
Okay.
is what I like to call traction or friction.
Okay.
Okay, and that's why it's important the way you hold your bow, because when you've that thumb that you have where you can use that big thumb muscle, you can flex your thumb, and it's hard to see this when you're just listening, but you'll hear it. If you flex your thumb, it makes more traction, and if you have too much traction for the amount of bow speed, you get that cockroach noise. It's good at Halloween, okay?
Yeah.
But if I have that same amount of friction and I move the bow a little bit faster, you get a nice tone. And did you hear the kind of crunch at the end?
Oh, sure.
That's because our speed slowed down, and so you didn't have enough speed for the amount of
For the end of the...
the end of traction.
Okay.
Yeah, so just kind of get what I call, like, I have my students do bow push-ups where they flex the thumb and they can see the stick going up and down like that.
That's really cute. Bow push-ups.
Bow push-ups, right. And so get about like kind of half-mast there and just pull a bow. See, that wasn't bad. That was all the way up to Hershey bar. That wasn't even Nestle's Crunch.
All right.
Yeah, so let's see if you can go Hershey's Special Dark. Okay,
Well,
so for Special Dark, what you need
weight.
to do, a little bit more weight, and here's the secret recipe. That knuckle right there, if you feel that while you're pulling the bow, it's going to sound better. I don't know why that works, but it does.
That's weird.
So here's the thing. If you've never put a bow on the string before, if you have ever ridden a bicycle or driven a car, and you can be aware that your tires are on the road, that's what it's like when you're bowing. You can feel the string through your fingers on the stick.
Okay.
Okay? And that's what you always want to be monitoring to get, and
Like
so,
a feedback kind of
yeah.
Okay.
So when you don't feel it, you're going to be getting Nestle's Crunch sound.
Okay. Which is bad.
Well, unless that's what you happen to want.
Right.
But usually we don't want it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Brahms would hate Nestle's Crunch sound.
Yeah.
Let's see if you can. Okay, so right now you're doing this eagle claw thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not good.
Eagles are bad.
Eagles are good, but they don't hold the bow very well.
Okay.
Okay, so because it keeps you from being able to feel the string, you have to use the force. Any kind of tension gets between you and the string. Yeah. Okay, now when you're on the G string there is the one you're playing. Now we're going to just make your whole arm level drop to the D string. And here's the thing about violas. I think cellos also suffer from this. It's like there's a relationship between friction and bow speed, where on the lowest string you can use lots of friction but not very much bow speed to get the best sound.
Okay.
And on the highest string you use less friction and more speed to get the best sound. In the middle strings, it's kind of like you have to figure out what to do in there.
Okay.
So
that has to do with mass, I bet, or something.
Yeah, the string mass, and it's different on every instrument, and it's different with different kinds of strings, and So I want to see. I know you're a trained musician, so I'm betting you're going to catch this rhythm right away.
Okay.
Jingle bells, in case you were wondering. Yeah, try not to let your bow come off the string. Try to keep your... Okay, good. Okay. And can you do that on the D string?
Does it matter which way my bow is going?
Not for now.
Okay.
Okay, so right now you had too much speed for the friction.
Okay. Too much. Okay, so.
Oh, also, it's easier if you do right there. Good. Okay, so here's your job. Let's just do it a little bit. Okay, no matter what I do, you keep doing that, okay?
I saw your foot go up, and
that was the fiddler's thing.
Okay.
The foot going up means okay, we're gonna stop now.
Yeah, because I definitely was not looking at you. I was so freaked out about this.
Yeah, but wasn't that pretty?
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah,
we could take this on tour.
Yeah, that's what I do with my adult violin class in their first lesson. They learn how to play that, and it's fun because you can start making music right away. That was called the Carrie polka.
All right.
Yeah.
Teach me a song.
Okay.
We did Ode to Joy with my bassoon lesson.
Do you want to do Ode to Joy?
Sure.
You want to do? Okay.
Because I know it.
Yeah. It's in the key of D.
Okay, so it's the string.
Yeah, and so we're going to start with that second finger. Can you just count up the... Not bad. Let's do it again.
Oh, shoot. Do I use two?
I'm going to just help your thumb a little bit.
Okay.
Here. Yeah. This between your index finger and your thumb makes it's sort of like a caliper, and you want it to just gently grip the side of the fingerboard, and that will inform you. That probably sounds like an F sharp. Let's hear it. A little bit flat. Go again. Okay, and then try this. Can you play the A? I know a different song I want to teach you.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it easier?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no.
I need easier music, don't I?
Yeah, but check this out. It's just transposed massively.
Okay.
Okay, but it's Bach.
Okay.
And I call it Mr. Bach's tunnel song, because a tunnel in violin language is when I have fingers on one string that's a lower string, but underneath my fingers you can play the open string. So I'm playing my A string, but I have fingers on the second string.
Okay.
And the reason that you care about that is because you can play this from the E major prelude for violin.
Okay. Okay. I'll never be able to play that. I'm telling you right now.
You think it's too hard?
Maybe.
You have to do this with your fingers.
Okay, well, let me. Okay.
Yeah, and now you have to go like up and down. Good.
Okay, well, that's not so bad.
No, and now do this. Yeah, you must have played cello in a former life. They always go close to the frog, but for us, it's easier in the
Oh,
middle.
okay.
Yeah. Here, let me guide you. And here's the secret with this. You have to make, your hand is going to make clockwise circles.
Oh, okay.
That takes all the guesswork out for you. We can go this fast, okay?
Okay.
Can you do that? Yeah. Now, while your bow's on the A string, you change fingers, so it goes like this.
Okay, so
It's
let me
easier
make sure I
than-
get these notes right.
Okay?
Okay. No, shoot.
That wasn't bad. Try it again.
Okay.
Too bad they don't have a visual on this.
Yeah. Well, we're taking some video. They're gonna
Okay.
laugh. They're gonna laugh.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned also doing Bach, holding a G, right? Can we do that real quick?
Oh.
Because that's super easy.
Right,
'Cause I
right.
only do one note. I can do that.
I'm glad you remembered that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get to do this. You can just hold a pedal point. Because, he was an organ player, so he'd like that.
Okay.
Okay? You just go ahead and get started.
Wait, which one am I doing?
That one. The third one. Okay, ready?
Okay.
Go. Now you need a new note.
Oh, okay. I was getting into it too. That
Yeah.
was good.
Yeah, so that's it. Now that instrument that you're holding right there was given to C4A by a woman named Elaine Gleason, and she was sort of a mentor for me. In fact, she was in the string quartet that played in the schools that made me want to play the violin.
Oh, okay.
And she was instrumental, so to speak, of getting the string program started in my hometown. And once it was up and running, they had this problem where nobody knew how to work on the instruments. And so she went and took classes and learned how to become a luthier.
Like repair? Sure.
And
Okay.
she opened her violin shop, and a couple of years ago, she closed it. And she was ready to be done with that.
Sure.
And she donated this viola that you're playing and a number of really
It
great
looks really
instruments
nice.
and stuff. It's a decent viola.
Yeah.
And so she gave all of her shop stuff to C4A. So
Oh.
I just think that's a really
Oh,
cool
yeah,
story.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think I've learned more than I've ever known about viola. I think we'll be coming out with a CD soon, I think. All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much, Robin, for being here with us today.
It was absolutely my pleasure, Daniel.
That was
Thanks
a
for
lot of
having
fun.
me.
Yeah. Make sure you check out her recital April 9th, 2 p.m. at the Urbana Free Library. Check out our website, urbanapops.org, where you can find the most recent episode of the UPO Popscast, as well as information about the orchestra and upcoming performances and events. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/urbanapops, where there are pictures and behind-the-scenes footage of this episode. We'd like to give our special thanks to the Community Center for the Arts for providing a studio space. You can read more about C4A at c-4a.org. The UPO Popscast is produced and engineered by Chris Peterson, and I am Daniel Sutherland. From all of us here at Urbana Pops Orchestra, thank you for listening. Be sure to leave us a like, comment, and tell us your favorite part of today's episode. Hit that subscribe button, and we will see you next time.